Welcome to the Green Voice Podcast. I'm your host, Grant Ervin with S&B USA. We're coming to you from the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University in downtown Pittsburgh. Today, I have a great guest with me, Leslie Hyde from Koppers, a venerable Pittsburgh name. Leslie, how are you this morning?
Good. How are you?
Good. And welcome back to the Green Voice. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
It's always it's fun when we have like a repeat offender. I mean, like another a guest that comes back. So it's always good to kind of check in and see where you're at and professionally and see the new and great things that are happening at Koppers. And so I'm excited to have you.
Happy to be here.
So maybe just quickly for the audience, because we have a couple topics that we want to dive into that are really timely, I think. But maybe if you can introduce yourself again for the audience and your role, and then also talk a little bit about Koppers and kind of the work that you guys do.
Sure. So I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Koppers. So obviously I manage the sustainability programs. I also manage strategy, which is a good connection because, as maybe we'll talk about, it's really important to connect your sustainability strategy to your business strategy.
Exactly.
So Koppers is a wood technology company. So wood, like lumber that you would use on an outdoor project or railroad ties or utility poles, we make the chemicals that go into those products. We also do make railroad ties and utility poles. So we're kind of an all encompassing wood technology company.
Interesting. It's so fascinating to connect names to like the technologies and the work that you guys do, and a long history in Pittsburgh too. Correct?
We do. We are the Koppers that exist today is a management-led buyout from the old Koppers company, which a lot of people would recognize that name. Yeah. So it's a new company, but we do carry the name, so a lot of people recognize it.
So talk to me a little bit about the industry that you're in terms of wood technologies and some of like where those products are going. I mean, you guys are manufacturing and shipping products, I'm assuming all around the world, correct?
We do operate around the world. We don't necessarily ship products around the world. We ship chemicals around the world, but not wood products because those are generally manufactured in country. But it's an industry, as you kind of alluded to, that a lot of people don't really even think about.
Right.
You think about the railroad tracks, that go behind your house, and
but not the ties.
You don't think about the ties, and that those are a major, part of the sustainability of that track.
Yep.
And utility poles, we've just had a couple of hurricanes in the southeast U.S. And when the utility poles are taken out during a hurricane, obviously that takes down telecommunications, it takes down electricity. So they're a critical part of the infrastructure of the U.S.
That's an interesting point that you bring up. So in some of your sustainability work, do you start to look at things like hurricanes, weather patterns, risk analysis, and how they affect your markets and the products that you're delivering? Is that a consideration that's starting to come more and more into your realm?
Certainly, it is. One of the things that's happening now is there's a reporting protocol called TCFD, the Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosure, and what that is. The kind of the intent of that is to make sure that all companies report their risks and opportunities in a consistent way, so that investors or private individuals can look at those companies and compare them against one another. And so what you look at with TCFD is both your transition risk. So what are the, what regulations you're going to have to comply with? Are there any carbon trading schemes that you have to comply with? Those types of things. But you also look at your physical risks. And so your own facilities, your own operating facilities and your supply chain, are they going to be impacted by climate change? Whether it's, more intense storms or rising sea levels or drought or flooding. So we have looked at all of our facilities from that standpoint.
In terms of their location?
And what their climate risks are in that location, because it's different in Western Australia than it is in, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So we have to look at each one of them separately. And then you obviously develop a plan to make sure that that facility is either hardened or that you address it in some way to make sure you can continue to operate. And then the second step of it, obviously, is to look at your supply chain, because if you can't get the materials
Right.
into your facility, you can't operate anyway.
Exactly.
So we're starting to undertake that piece of it.
Interesting. What's nuts and bolts? Like, let's nerd out for a second on this, because we're starting to look at like the TCFD piece in the construction industry where I operate, and like, what does that analysis look like for you? Is that kind of just surveying across the enterprise? Are you interviewing people or collecting, weather or climate data, or what's that process look like for a company like Koppers?
It's pretty much a data process. So you're looking at weather maps. You're looking at prediction scenarios. One of the things we're looking at right now is to work with the insurance industry, because they do a lot of that modeling for catastrophic risk purposes. So is there data there that we could use that would be helpful to our own analysis?
Interesting.
So it's kind of a data analysis. Just looking at every individual facility and its kind of ecosystem.
Have you uncovered anything, or is there any like insights that you've gleaned thus far? Like, sounds like you're early in the process, but like any insights that you've started to kind of gather, like, like you mentioned Western Australia or Kentucky, or like how the climate in those areas or the supply chains, like how they impact the business? Like, is there any little nuggets that you found, or is it more kind of a 30, 40,000 foot level right now?
It's pretty high level at this point. I think we have been surprised by some facilities that are at risk that we wouldn't have really thought to be at risk.
Interesting.
And generally that's from a water perspective, more so than a traditional climate, perspective, although it's probably influenced by climate. But, whether there is drought potential or too much water. So those are generally the risks that we have found about our facilities.
Water is interesting. When I worked in the city space, like that was one of the quick analogies that we made. We were in multiple networks of like cities all around the world, and what you would find is something kind of a simple analogy is that either you have too much water or not enough.
That's right.
And it's there sometimes like the sweet spot there in between there, a bit like too much, not enough, and that's like one of the most material factors for water.
It is.
On your side, is that water issue one that is related to manufacturing, like the need for water to manufacture, or is it more of like flood risk type of challenges?
No, it's more like flood or drought risk.
Okay.
So, drought risk being impacting like the area that you're in and whether you can continue to operate there. And obviously flood risk, impacting your facility directly.
That's fascinating. I think it's one of those things that more and more businesses, astute businesses, as they start to go down, down that path of sustainability. It's kind of like, the gateway drug of innovation, right? Like you start to ask these questions, but it influences the business because these are questions that aren't always asked, right?
Right. I mean, we have, for many years looked at emergency responses at our facilities, but we have typically
from
looked
a safety
at,
perspective.
From a safety perspective. So we've typically looked at fire and other physical risks to the facilities. We haven't always looked at the weather as one of those emergency response issues. But it fits right in with the structure that we have always operated our facilities. Looking at the physical risk of our facilities and how we manage them.
Have you found that the interplay between safety and sustainability, particularly on the manufacturing, like that? Like you see, safety is kind of it's paramount in the construction industry and manufacturing space, but there's these little kind of interactions that you wouldn't necessarily assume on the surface, right? That plays out.
Oh, absolutely. So we've always had a very strong safety program. We've been working on that for many, many years. And so, when we started looking at sustainability, we said, let's continue to look at safety program, the kind of traditional safety program, but what additional things are there? So how is this affecting drivers? And how one of the things that we've but looked at is human trafficking. So we have drivers on the road, all the time, and so can our drivers be kind of eyes and ears for human trafficking? And so we give them training to how do you identify human trafficking, and we give them the tools to report if they see something. So those kind of little connections that when you think about sustainability as a bigger concept than safety, how do you bring that into the safety world?
Which is, I know, some of the big challenges with you guys follow like the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs, and I remember conversations related specifically to human trafficking. There was a professor up at Carnegie Mellon who was really involved in the SDGs, and she was educating folks on challenges like human trafficking, and you wouldn't necessarily immediately correlate that topic in a safety or an environmental context, right? But there is that intersection that plays out in when you're thinking of logistics and ways you can create, like you said, eyes and ears or other types of co-benefits through a sustainability program.
Right.
We talked a little about TCFD, which is, I think, a new and growing acronym in the sustainability space. But there's other regulations that are happening, particularly from the European Union, I think, that are also impacting Koppers' business. It was interesting, and maybe if you can talk a little bit about that for our audiences. It's almost like the weather's coming the opposite direction. Everything goes west-east. Here it's coming from the east to the west, I think, in terms of some of these regulatory innovations that are happening in the EU. What's your experience at Koppers been like with that?
Yeah, so Europe is ahead of the United States in terms of sustainability and their regulatory structure to support sustainability. And we operate in Europe. We also operate in Australia. And Australia is kind of ahead of us also. So we're playing catch up a little bit, but the main regulation in Europe that a lot of people are dealing with right now is called CSRD. It's the Corporate Social Responsibility Directive.
Okay.
And again, it's a level playing field kind of a regulation. The European Union wants everybody to report on the same thing so that investors and the public can compare companies across the entire platform. So it requires a pretty thorough analysis of your supply chain or your value chain. So not just raw materials, but all the way down to your customers. So you have to understand all those connections. And then what they call a double materiality assessment. So financial assessment, but also a sustainability, safety, environmental assessment of all of those risks. And then look where your gaps are. And so we are now in the process of doing that. We're doing it in Europe first, Australia second, and then we'll bring it to North America. But it's a pretty comprehensive exercise.
Okay.
And it really opens your eyes to the connections that you have that you might not sometimes think about. So, so we operate chemical facilities, we have labs, so when we think of our supply chain, we sometimes think of the big raw materials that come in.
Okay.
But we don't always connect it to the chemicals that we use in our lab, reagents and things like that, and how those come in, how they're used, and how they're disposed.
Oh, interesting.
So, we've always managed that from an environmental perspective, but looking at it from a sustainability perspective is a little bit different.
That's interesting. In terms of, are you finding things in terms of the different products that you could use, or ways you handle material waste and things of that nature?
So we're still in the beginning stages of this. Okay. So we're at the stage right now where we're doing this double materiality assessment, which will tell us, which things are most important. Material, that is the concept that you use, materiality. So which things are most material to us, and then we'll start looking at gaps. So we haven't really gotten to the gaps analysis yet.
Now, when you go through a process like that, who's involved? Like it's it's not a one person job, right? Like there has to be a lot of different people that touch the process. What does that look like for Koppers?
Yeah, there are so many people involved, and that's one thing that surprises the businesses sometimes.
Yeah.
So when we started looking at CSRD, we brought a consultant in because we are not experts in this. So and they started telling us who they want to talk to. So they want to talk to operations people. They want to talk to financial people. They want to talk to safety people. They want to talk to logistics, raw materials purchasing. So, it's a comprehensive exercise and involves a lot of people. Now, obviously, some of those people have kind of a tangential connection, and we interview them. We find out what their connection is, and then the sustainability people kind of take over the analysis of that.
Okay.
But we make sure we get the input from all of the operators that are actually doing those functions.
In your role as the chief sustainability officer, how would you characterize yourself in that? Are you like the orchestrator? Are you the shepherd with the hook? Is it a little bit of both? Or like how do you? What role do you play, and kind of how do you see yourself in that process?
So I guess I would kind of see myself as the air traffic controller.
Air traffic control.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the tower.
Yeah.
And you're looking at who's on what runway and who can take off and who can land. Okay.
So what's happening in Europe and what they're doing at this point in terms of developing the CSRD and starting to bring Australia into it and getting a team of put together over there to look at it. So it's more like orchestrating all of those things.
Okay.
I'm certainly not the expert on it. So what I'm doing is putting the pieces in place to make sure that the experts get the information they need and give us the analysis that really helps us.
And then once you get that information, how do you use it? Like do you take that, up the chain to kind of your executive team and share insights, or out to the public, or a little bit of both? Like what's that for you?
Definitely the executive team will see it at some point. They're aware that it's happening now. I don't get them involved in the details.
They don't want to know about the weeds.
No.
Yeah.
So, at the point where we've developed our gaps and a plan to address them, then we'll get to the executive team and say, here's what we see, here's our plan, is this something that we can move forward on? Executive team, the board is also very interested in this. They hear about CSRD.
Sure.
They hear that.
As fiduciaries, they're aware of it.
That's right. There's also a lot of talk that a lot of companies are behind the 8 ball on this, and they want to make sure that we are not there.
Meaning that they're late to the game?
They're late to the game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's true. I've talked to a lot of people who aren't even aware yet that it impacts them.
They're like, CSR what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you don't want to be like that. Right?
No, you don't want to be like that. So the whole leadership chain in Koppers knows this is happening. They know we're addressing it, and at the right point, we'll tell them kind of what our plan is. Now, coming behind that, there are more regulations. So there's another regulation in Europe called the CSDDD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, and that is aimed more at supply chains and human rights within supply chains, and whether or not you've done your diligence to make sure that your supply chain does not have human rights violations or issues within it. So that's a couple years down the road, but we're starting to plan for that now.
That's interesting. And that's where, we were just talking about things like human trafficking, for example, where that topics like that, or child labor, or other things come into the sustainability space, right? So you really are kind of an omniscient character in how all this information gets played out into the company. You mentioned too in your title, strategy is a piece of that. How are you taking information that you're gaining on your sustainability side and applying that to strategy?
So what we've done is we've looked at our materiality analyses that we've done over time, and we're getting new materiality analyses through this CSRD process, and we've developed a list of what we think are the material topics for Koppers.
Okay.
Now there are
Like you can't look at everything.
That's right. There are hundreds of topics, and so you have to get to the handful that are really material that you want to work on. And so we're starting to narrow down to which things are important to us. And as we're in the process right now of developing our business strategy for the next 5 years, so we'll feed those in. So, for example, we don't have the final analysis yet, but let's say energy is important to us from a climate change perspective.
Sure. So your scope 1, scope 2 emissions.
Right. So you would want to build energy reduction or renewable energy into your strategy so that you have the capital available to address those issues going forward. So
to
that's
pay for offsets or alternative fuel uses or things of that nature. Okay. I'm going to have my fleet guys listen to this episode, so for sure. That's amazing and an awesome type of integration. And, I wanted to pivot here, a little bit to these activities you're taking on are producing results. And one of the things, just doing a little bit of my homework, I wanted to touch base on is kind of your acknowledgement by U.S. News and World Report. Was that right?
Newsweek,
excuse me. And then also your sustainability report, kind of part and parcel that they go together. The Newsweek acknowledgement, talk to me about that. Like what does that? How do you do that? And then, what does that mean for both you personally and the company to see that type of acknowledgement?
Yeah, so it's the Newsweek annual list of America's most responsible companies.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Thank you. So we just got named to that for the 4th year in a row. So you do a questionnaire that Newsweek sends out, and it's getting easier and easier as they get better at this. So you give them the data, and they do whatever analysis they do.
They put it in a box and they shake it up.
The black box.
Yeah.
And they list the top. I think it's like 250 companies in the United States, and we're in the top 100. I can't remember exactly our number, but we've gone up every year. So we're really proud of that. Yeah,
that's super impressive. I mean, because that type of acknowledgement, we recently just won an award for the Public-Private Partnership Awards for our Pennsylvania Bridges program, and going through that process, the due diligence, I think is the winning the award is great. That's like the obviously the shiny object, but going through the work of providing that data and the due diligence process, that has a lot of value to you and your team, I'm assuming. Painful to collect it maybe, but like to put it forward, it gives you the opportunity to acknowledge the hard work that you put in.
It does. I would say that, we do a CSR every year, a corporate sustainability report every year, and most of the data that Newsweek asks for
is already there.
We already developed.
Oh, that's easy.
So it's really just putting it in a different format and giving it to them. So it was kind of a, when we started it 4 years ago, it was kind of let's just see where we land on this, and we landed on the list, so we're happy about that.
So you helped me tee that up a little bit. So good job on teeing that. My next question, which was, I was noticing in your report, kind of the progress that you have made in emissions reduction. So I want to get the year right. 7 years early. I'm going to take a guess.
7 years early.
Yeah, 7 years early from your targeted goal. Walk us through that, because that's a major accomplishment. A lot of times you see companies set a 2030 or a 2050 target or whatever that date may be, and it's so far off. And they're, you always get the folks who are like, well, we're never going to accomplish that. And then there's others who are like, well, maybe. And then all of a sudden, in your case, it happened. Talk us through goal setting to the activities that made it possible. And then I want to kind of go for what's next for you, because now that you accomplished one goal, you're going to set another. But how do you set that goal, and then what was the process to get there even earlier than you thought?
So this was the first time we had set a climate goal, and so quite honestly, we didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So we kind of
That's a dirty secret. Nobody does.
yeah, that's true.
And it's unique for every industry, I think,
It is.
too.
Mm-hmm. So we took a stab at it, and we said 50% reduction over our 2007 baseline, and that's the baseline that a lot of industry has used.
50%.
Right, 50%.
Baseline.
So, so it gave us some time to do it, obviously, and that was by 2030. So, I mean, the results are culmination of a lot of things. We put a lot of attention on energy efficiency, and we've been doing that for quite some time. So
in your manufacturing
facilities.
Okay.
So using less energy, obviously, is going to reduce your emissions. We also have been putting more emphasis recently on renewable energy. We have some solar installations in Australia that have been going in, and those are kind of test installations right now, just to see how they work, and whether or not we want to expand them, what the ROI is on them.
Is this facility level or is this utility scale?
Facility level.
Okay.
We are helped along the way by the fact that our Denmark facility uses a lot of renewable energy. They get a lot of their energy from wind, so that helps us.
Okay.
And it's just.
Quick shout out to my friends in Denmark. Just locate your manufacturing facility.
Yeah, it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy then.
And then just restructuring of the company. As needs change, as customers' demands change, you restructure your company, and we've taken those opportunities to say, how do we reduce? If we don't need 2 facilities to serve this customer, let's get down to 1 facility to serve this customer. So that facility has more throughput and is better utilized, but it also reduces the
your carbon footprint.
The carbon footprint from the other facilities. So it's been a combination of a lot of things.
Interesting. Do you see how important is the role of like operations managers and folks in the manufacturing space of the company to both developing kind of those solutions as well as implementing them?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah,
you couldn't do it without them. So we are right now undertaking an analysis at one of our largest facilities. It's in Chicago, looking for energy efficiency or reduction opportunities there, and the staff at that facility is completely involved in that because no one knows that facility is the way they do, and so we have some recommendations out of that that we need to talk over and decide what we're going to do. But one of the interesting ones is on renewable energy. It's community solar.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. So this is buying into. I'm not going to explain this right because it's pretty complicated, but it's buying into a solar facility.
Yep.
And you don't get so if we did this in Chicago, the Chicago facility would not get that particular
direct energy.
That direct energy. But you would get a credit for that, a reduction in your electricity costs, and then a carbon credit that you can apply anywhere within the company within some restrictions. So we're looking at that.
And so you would, let me play that out a little bit, you would ultimately be like the anchor tenant in a community solar
that's a good analogy.
Aggregation. That's amazing because that gives like huge benefits like to the community then.
Exactly.
So you have a manufacturing facility which otherwise probably in Illinois was using like coal-fired power at some point, or natural gas, maybe nuclear, but then you can directly benefit the community by being the anchor tenant in that.
Exactly.
That is a terrific win-win for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, kudos to that. One kind of final question on that side is that how much do you balance the top-down goal setting and bottom-up solution building? Like because you have to have both, right? Is it the folks at the facilities that are helping to set the goals, or is it corporate strategy that's saying, we shall reduce emissions by 50%. Like,
Yeah.
What's that been like for you?
So like I said, the first time we went through this, we didn't really know what we were doing. So it was a corporate strategy directed.
Okay.
And then the facilities kind of stepped up to
Like, what's
make
this?
it come,
Yeah.
to make it work.
Yeah.
This time around, so we're just in the process now of resetting our goals since we
Okay.
met our goal. This time we're connecting much more to the operations people to say what's possible
Yep.
for a couple of reasons. First of all, once you've met your 50% goal, the next 50% is going to be a lot harder.
Sure.
And so we really need their input on it. And secondly, like we've been talking about, they're the ones who are going to do this. And
Yeah.
so it has to work for them.
For them. And I'm going to imagine there's a lot of localized solutions to that too, right? Like Australia versus Illinois. Like they're like two different,
Oh, absolutely.
two different markets, different power providers,
Different regulations. Right, different incentives.
Yeah, so that's totally complex. Leslie, just the home stretch here. So many great things happening at Koppers. Newsweek Award, early accomplishing your targets and goals, regulation reform. What are some things that are on the horizon for you that that you're starting to put your energy into as we turn the corner into 2025?
So I think one of the biggest things that I would like to work on is what I call operationalizing sustainability. So we started sustainability as a corporate kind of initiative, and we took the UN SDGs and we looked at them, we set goals around them, and kind of took that out to the business. The businesses have picked that torch up, and they have continued these goals along. So I want to take the corporate out of it a little bit and allow the facilities more ownership, and let them take the initiative and let them really guide what's right for their facility, because maybe energy is the big issue at one facility, but maybe water is the biggest issue at another, and so they need to decide where they want to spend their energy.
Yeah.
So within the next year or so, I think that's one of the things we're going to be working on is handing over the reins to the operators.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, I mean, that really takes its kind of like next level sustainability activity, right? Where you're starting to get that creativity and that bottom up energy and the creative innovation process.
Right.
So, so exciting. Thank you for coming back and stopping in here at the Green Voice and joining us at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park and hanging out with Wayne and Anthony and myself this morning. Thank you all for listening in. And Leslie, we hope to have you back again soon.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for listening in to The Green Voice. I'm Grant Ervin with S&B USA. Take a listen next time, and we'll see you at The Green Voice.